October 21st, 1944, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Rittenhouse Square District, building at 1847 Delancey Street. At 4:40 p.m., an unmarked black Plymouth sedan pulled into the courtyard. 3 men in civilian clothes stepped out. They walked purposefully toward entrance C. 5 minutes later, they emerged with Nathaniel Hayes, 49 years old, building superintendent. In his hands was a paper grocery sack with vegetables for a neighbor on the 5th floor. Handcuffs clicked shut just above the carrots. The entire courtyard emptied onto fire escapes and stoops. Children froze on the jungle gym. Elderly women on benches stopped their knitting. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Uncle Nate, kind Uncle Nate, who fixed everyone's plumbing, carried heavy parcels for widows, gave children Hershey bars, and told funny stories about the Great War. Uncle Nate, who always had time to listen, to help, to comfort. Uncle Nate, whom the entire building adored. Only 3 people in that courtyard knew the truth. 2 mothers and Detective Garrison Fletcher Holbrook of the Philadelphia Police Department. They knew that kind Uncle Nate was a monster who had methodically changed cities for 20 years, leaving behind a trail of shattered young souls. It had all begun 2 weeks before the arrest, October 7th, 1944, a Monday. 9-year-old Vera Kessler came home from playing at 5:30 in the evening. Usually, she burst through the apartment door noisily, dropped her school bag in the hallway, shouted ___0___, and ran to wash her hands. But today she entered quietly, closed the door almost soundlessly, removed her shoes, and silently walked to her room. Dorothy May stood in the kitchen peeling potatoes for supper. She heard the bedroom door close. The key turned in the lock. The mother's instincts prickled. Vera never locked herself in. She had no secrets from her mother. They were close, trusted each other, talked about everything. Dorothy May set down the peeler, wiped her hands on her apron, and approached the bedroom door. "Vera, honey?" Silence. "Sweetheart, you home?" From behind the door came a muffled, "Yes." The voice was strange, hoarse. "Open up, please." A pause, then the click of the lock. The door opened a crack. Vera stood by the window, her back to her mother. Her shoulders were trembling. Dorothy May understood her daughter was crying. She entered, closed the door behind her, and approached. "What happened, sunshine?" Vera turned around sharply. Her face was wet with tears, eyes red, lips quivering. "Ma," she stumbled. I don't want to." Her voice broke. Dorothy May hugged her daughter, pressed her close. "Shh, shh. It's all right. Tell your ma. What happened? Did you quarrel with Ruthie?" Vera shook her head. "With Eleanor?" Another negative gesture. "Then what?" The girl sobbed and whispered, "I don't want to go to Uncle Nate's for candy anymore." Dorothy May froze. Uncle Nate. Nathaniel Hayes, superintendent from apartment 27, entrance C. That very same Uncle Nate who helped everyone, who last week fixed their kitchen faucet, who a month ago helped Dorothy's husband haul a refrigerator up to the 5th floor, who always smiled, always greeted people, always ready to lend a hand. The girl remained silent, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. "Sweetheart, tell me, what happened?" Vera, quietly, with long pauses, stumbling over words, began to tell. Today, after school, she was playing in the courtyard, rolling a hoop. Uncle Nate came out of the building, saw her, walked over, asked how school was. She answered, "Good." He said, "Vera, sweetheart, I've got a surprise for you. My niece sent a whole box of chocolates from New York City, fancy ones. Want some?" Vera loved candy. At home, they bought it rarely, expensive with the rationing. And here was a whole box, and fancy New York chocolates at that, not the cheap kind. She nodded. Uncle Nate smiled. "Come on up, I'll give you some. But quiet now, or the other kids will see and I'll have to share with everyone. They climbed to the third floor. Uncle Nate opened the door to his apartment. Come in, don't be shy. Vera entered. The door closed behind her. The lock clicked. What followed, Vera told in fragments. Dorothy May listened, and with each word her heart clenched tighter. The apartment was dark, curtains drawn. Uncle Nate led her into a room. There were no chocolates. He gave Vera a piece of candy, sat right next to her, and asked her not to tell her parents about it. Dorothy May felt a wave of horror wash over her at that moment. After that, Vera fell silent. Dorothy May held her daughter, stroked her hair, and felt rage rising inside her, so black and hot that her hands trembled. Vera, honey, baby girl, he's the one who did wrong, not you. Him. You did nothing bad. Nothing. You hear me? The girl sobbed. But he said it was a secret. Dorothy May took her daughter's face in her palms, looked into her eyes. __quote, _21 ___. Vera pressed against her mother and truly wept, sobbing, freeing herself from the burden of fear and shame. When her daughter finally fell asleep, Dorothy May went into the kitchen, sat at the table. Her hands were shaking. Thoughts raced. Her first impulse was to run outside, climb to the third floor, break down the door of apartment 27 and what? What would she do? Yell at Hayes? Hit him? And then? He'd say she'd lost her mind, that the girl made it all up, that he had no idea what she was talking about. The neighbors would take his side. Kind Uncle Nate, the heart of the building, helps everyone. And some hysterical woman showed up with wild accusations. Dorothy May had worked as a bookkeeper at Baldwin Locomotive Works for 12 years. She knew how the American world worked, knew that the word of an adult man, a respected working man, a war veteran, carried more weight than the word of a 9-year-old girl. Knew that if she went with accusations alone, without proof, she'd be laughed at. Or worse, accused of slander, of trying to ruin an honest man's reputation. And Vera would be dragged through doctors, through committees, through interrogations, traumatized even more. Dorothy May lowered her head onto her hands and quietly wept from helplessness. But remaining silent was impossible. The next day, October 8th, she came home from work early, stood at the window and looked into the courtyard. Children were playing hide and seek. Vera sat on a bench next to her friend Ruthie, drawing something with chalk on the pavement. She stayed closer to entrance D, away from entrance C. And from entrance C, Uncle Nate emerged. In his work coveralls with a toolbox, saw the children, waved, smiled. The children shouted back. He walked past them, patted a boy on the head, winked at an older girl. She giggled. Dorothy May watched this scene and felt everything inside contract. There he was, smiling, charming, kind Uncle Nate, and yet She couldn't finish the thought even mentally. This man lived in their building, walked through this courtyard, interacted with children, and nobody suspected anything. Nobody knew. What if Vera wasn't the first? What if there had been other girls? This thought pierced Dorothy May like a knife thrust. She remembered how a month ago the Kessler family had just moved into this building. Hayes had been one of the first to come introduce himself, brought a pie, offered to help with repairs, was so nice, so caring. They had welcomed him as a good neighbor, trusted him, and On October 9th, Dorothy May called in sick to work, told her husband Arthur she had a migraine, waited until he left for the shipyard, then dressed Vera, took her by the hand and went to the police station on South Street. In the station vestibule, she stopped, looked at the door with the frosted glass, at the sergeant behind the desk inside. Fear gripped her throat. What if they didn't believe her? What if they thought she was crazy? What if they questioned Vera harshly, made her repeat the story again and again until the girl broke down? Dorothy May squeezed her daughter's hand. Vera looked up at her. In those eyes was trust, faith that her mother would protect her, would do what was right. Dorothy May drew a deep breath and opened the door. The sergeant, a burly man with gray temples, looked up from his paperwork. Dorothy May approached the desk. Her voice trembled slightly, but she spoke clearly. She couldn't continue. The sergeant's expression changed. He stood, came around the desk, pulled out a chair. Dorothy May sat, still holding Vera's hand, and began to speak. The sergeant listened without interrupting. When Dorothy May finished, he nodded slowly. "I'm going to call Detective Holbrook. He handles these cases. Just wait here." He disappeared through a door, returned 5 minutes later with a tall, lean man in his 50s. Graying hair, deep-set eyes, serious expression. Detective Garrison Fletcher Holbrook. He shook Dorothy May's hand, crouched down to Vera's level. "Hello, Vera. My name is Garrison. I'm a police detective. Your ma told me something bad happened to you. I want to help, but I need you to tell me about it. Can you do that?" Vera looked at her mother. Dorothy May nodded encouragingly. The girl turned back to the detective. In a small voice, she began to speak. Holbrook listened, took notes, asked gentle questions. What day was this? What time? What did his apartment look like? What did he say exactly? Vera answered as best she could. When she finished, Holbrook closed his notebook, looked at Dorothy May. "Ma'am, I believe your daughter, and I'm going to investigate. But I need to be honest with you. Without additional evidence, without other witnesses, this will be difficult. His word against hers. And juries," he trailed off. Dorothy May understood. What if there were others, other girls? Holbrook's eyes sharpened. Dorothy May shook her head. Holbrook stood, paced, stopped. Quote 37. He paused. Quote 38. He turned to Vera. Quote 39. Vera nodded, tears welling up. Holbrook looked back at Dorothy May. Dorothy May took the card, clutched it like a lifeline. Holbrook's jaw tightened. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when I put him behind bars." The next day, October 10th, Holbrook began his investigation. He went to the building at 1847 Delancey Street, knocked on doors, asked questions. "Do you know Nathaniel Hayes? Have you ever left your children in his care? Have your children mentioned going to his apartment?" Most neighbors spoke glowingly of Uncle Nate. Such a helpful man, always willing to lend a hand. The kids just love him. Nobody reported anything suspicious. Holbrook's frustration mounted. That evening, he sat in his office reviewing Hayes's record. Born 1895 in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Served in France during the Great War, received an honorable discharge. Worked as a building superintendent in various cities, Scranton, Harrisburg, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. Moved frequently. Every 2 to 4 years, a new city, a new building. Holbrook's instincts screamed. Why so many moves? He started making telephone calls. Scranton PD, Harrisburg PD, Baltimore PD, Washington Metro Police. __quote _49 __. Most said no, or couldn't find records that old, but Washington gave him a lead. Hayes? Yeah, we remember him. Left in 39. Right after some parents made noise about him being inappropriate with their daughter. Nothing came of it. Parents withdrew the complaint, said they didn't want the publicity. Holbrook's pulse quickened. Quote 51. Quote 52. Dead end. But it confirmed his suspicion. Hayes had a pattern. Move to a new city, establish himself, build trust, target vulnerable children. When suspicion arose, move again. On October 11th, Holbrook went back to 1847 Delancey Street. This time, he focused on mothers. He approached a young woman with a toddler. The woman looked puzzled. Holbrook gave a vague answer and moved on. He spoke to a dozen mothers. Same responses. Uncle Nate was beloved. Then, on the fourth floor, he knocked on apartment 42. A woman in her 30s answered. Brunette, tired eyes. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 55, underscore, underscore, underscore. Holbrook introduced himself, asked his questions. The woman's expression changed. She glanced back into her apartment, then stepped into the hallway, closing the door partway. "Why are you asking about Hayes?" she asked quietly. Holbrook studied her, saw fear, saw hesitation, saw something she was holding back. "A complaint has been filed. I'm investigating. If you know something, ma'am, I need to hear it." The woman bit her lip. A long silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "My daughter, Miriam. She's 8. Last month, she went to his apartment. He gave her candy, and he—" She couldn't finish. Tears streamed down her face. Her voice broke. Holbrook took out his notebook. He wrote quickly. Ingrid paled. Ingrid Sorensen stood in that hallway, torn between fear of her husband's anger, fear of public scandal, and the knowledge that a predator was walking free among children. She thought of Miriam, who had nightmares now, who flinched when men came too close, who had stopped laughing the way she used to. She thought of other girls, other daughters, and she made her choice. "All right, I'll come. Tomorrow morning, I'll bring Miriam." Holbrook nodded. "You're doing the right thing." As he left, he felt a spark of hope. 2 victims, 2 families willing to speak. It was a start. October 12th. Dorothy Mae Kessler and Ingrid Sorensen met for the first time in Detective Holbrook's office. The 2 mothers looked at each other across the desk. Dorothy saw her own pain reflected in Ingrid's eyes. Ingrid saw her own guilt mirrored in Dorothy's expression. Without a word, they understood each other. They were bound by the terrible knowledge of what had been done to their daughters, and by the determination to ensure Hayes never did it again. Holbrook explained the situation. Dorothy spoke up. Ingrid nodded. Holbrook frowned. Dorothy's expression hardened. "Then we'll be careful. But we can't just sit here and do nothing." Holbrook considered, finally nodded. "All right, but you're not doing this alone. I'll assign a female officer to assist, someone the mothers might feel comfortable talking to." October 13th. Officer Margaret O'Reilly joined the investigation. A no-nonsense woman in her 40s, she had a daughter of her own and understood the mother's fear. Together with Dorothy and Ingrid, she began discreetly approaching other mothers in the building. They would catch them at the market, at the park, in the laundry room. They asked mothers a simple question. "Has your child ever been alone with the building superintendent?" Most reacted with silence or defensiveness, but some confessed their worst fears. By October 15th, 3 more families were found. 3 girls aged 7, 8, and 10 had all been given candy, touched inappropriately, and told to keep it secret. Their parents had chosen to remain silent. Until now. October 16th. Holbrook called a meeting. 5 mothers. Dorothy Mae Kessler, Ingrid Sorensen, Catherine Walsh, Evelyn Pritchard, Helen Kowalski. 5 daughters. Vera, Miriam, Annette, Judith, Sophie. 5 statements. 5 accounts of the same pattern. The friendly superintendent, the offer of candy, the closed apartment door, the inappropriate touches, the demand for secrecy. Holbrook spread the statements on his desk. "This is enough. I'm getting a search warrant. Tomorrow morning, we're going into Hayes's apartment." Officer O'Reilly spoke. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 80, underscore, underscore. Holbrook's expression was grim. Photographs, diaries, anything that proves a pattern of behavior. And I'm hoping, he paused, I'm hoping we find evidence of other victims. Because if Hayes has been doing this for 20 years, there might be records, souvenirs. Men like this, they don't just commit crimes, they document them. They relive them. The mothers sat in silence, processing this horror. Then Dorothy asked, "When you arrest him, will our daughters have to testify?" Holbrook nodded. "In court, yes. The defense will want to cross-examine them. I won't lie to you. It will be difficult. But I'll prepare them. I'll make sure they understand what to expect, and I'll be there with them every step of the way." October 17th, 1944, 6 a.m. Detective Holbrook, Officer O'Reilly, and 4 uniformed officers executed the search warrant. They knocked on the door of apartment 27. Nathaniel Pemberton Hayes answered, wearing a bathrobe, surprised. Holbrook held up the warrant. Hayes's confusion seemed genuine. "Search? For what? I don't understand." But he moved aside. The officers entered. Hayes stood in the doorway, watching, protesting. "This is outrageous. I'm a respected member of this community. I demand to know what I'm accused of." Holbrook ignored him. He went straight to the bedroom, pulled open drawers, searched the closet. Under the bed, they found a locked metal box. Inside were dozens of inappropriate photographs of young girls, including some from the building. Beneath them was a journal with Hayes's handwritten records of encounters. Holbrook's hands shook as he held it. Turned to Hayes. "Nathaniel Pemberton Hayes, you are under arrest for crimes against children." Hayes's face drained of color. __quote _92 __. But his voice lacked conviction. The officers handcuffed him, let him out. As they walked through the courtyard, residents watched in shock. The kind superintendent, the helpful neighbor, led away in handcuffs. The news spread like wildfire through the building. Some refused to believe it. __quote _93 __. Others began to remember odd things, times when Uncle Nate had been just a bit too friendly with their children. Moments they had dismissed as harmless, but now seemed sinister in hindsight. And the mothers, Dorothy, Ingrid, Catherine, Evelyn, Helen, stood together on the sidewalk, watching the police car drive away. They had done it. They had stopped him. But the battle was far from over. The trial began on November 20th, 1944. The courtroom was packed. Journalists from the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Evening Bulletin. Curious onlookers. Residents from 1847 Delancey Street. Hayes sat at the defense table, impeccably dressed, looking like anyone's kindly uncle. His lawyer, a slick operator named Morton Graves, had coached him well. Hayes's strategy was denial. The photographs were art studies. The journal was creative fiction. The girls were confused, or lying, or coached by their mothers. Graves hammered this point relentlessly. On cross-examination, he tried to rattle the mothers. Quote, 94, quote, 95, quote, 96, quote. The mothers held firm, answered calmly, refused to be intimidated. But when the daughters took the stand, Graves showed no mercy. He questioned them harshly, implied they were making it up for attention, suggested their mothers put words in their mouths. Young Vera Kessler broke down crying on the stand. Dorothy had to fight the urge to rush forward and shield her daughter. But Detective Holbrook had prepared them. He had told Vera, __quote _, 97, __. Vera wiped her tears, looked directly at the jury, and in a clear voice said, quote, 98. The turning point came when the prosecution presented the journal. Prosecutor Daniel Ashford read passages aloud, dates, locations, descriptions that matched the testimonies of the 5 girls exactly. Hayes's face grew paler with each reading. Graves tried to object, to claim the journal was illegally obtained, to argue it was inadmissible. The judge overruled him. Then, Ashford called an expert witness, Dr. Benjamin Saunders, a psychiatrist who specialized in criminal behavior. Saunders testified about the pattern of predatory behavior, how abusers groom their victims, how they isolate children, how they manipulate trust, how they silence their victims with shame and threats. Expert Saunders testified that the journal and photographs were typical of a serial predator who records his actions for satisfaction. The defense then called Hayes to the stand. He portrayed himself as a kind veteran who loved children innocently, gave them candy out of empathy, and insisted the photos and journal were harmless. He denied any inappropriate touching. He looked directly at the jury, his eyes moist. "I would never hurt a child. Never. This is a terrible misunderstanding." Ashford's cross-examination was brutal. Hayes stammered. Hayes had no answer. Ashford pressed. Hayes's lawyer objected. "Irrelevant." The judge allowed it. Hayes answered weakly, "Work opportunities." Ashford produced employment records. "According to these documents, you left each position voluntarily, despite satisfactory performance reviews. Why would a man in his 40s and 50s keep uprooting himself unless he had a compelling reason?" Hayes's composure cracked. Ashford leaned in. Hayes's silence was damning. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. On November 28, 1944, they returned. The foreman stood. "On all counts, we find the defendant guilty." Hayes slumped in his chair. Graves protested, promising appeals. The judge gavelled him silent. Sentencing was set for December 10th. In the hallway outside the courtroom, the 5 mothers embraced. They had won. Their daughters would have justice. Detective Holbrook shook each mother's hand. Dorothy May looked at him with tears in her eyes. Holbrook's jaw tightened. "Not if I have anything to say about it. I'm going to recommend the maximum sentence, and I'm going to make sure every prison he's sent to knows exactly what he is. Child predators don't fare well behind bars." December 10th, 1944. Sentencing Day. Judge Harold Carmichael was known as a hard man, tough on crime, zero tolerance for violence against the vulnerable. He had reviewed the case thoroughly, read every testimony, examined every photograph, studied the journal. When Hayes stood before him, Carmichael's expression was stone. Carmichael paused, letting the words sink in. Hayes's face was ashen. Graves made a perfunctory objection. Carmichael ignored it. Banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned. Take him away." The years that followed were difficult for the victims and their families. Vera Kessler struggled with nightmares, trust issues, a fear of men that persisted into her teenage years. Dorothy and Arthur enrolled her in therapy, a new and somewhat controversial treatment at the time. Slowly, with the help of Dr. Eleanor Finch, a psychologist who specialized in childhood trauma, Vera began to heal. She learned that what happened wasn't her fault, that speaking up was brave, that she had the power to overcome. By 1950, Vera was 15, a bright student considering college. She wanted to study social work. __quote _120 __, she told her mother. Dorothy wept with pride. The other girls followed similar paths. Some healed faster than others. Miriam Sorensen became a teacher, dedicating her life to creating safe environments for children. Annette Walsh joined the Philadelphia Police Department, working in the newly formed Juvenile Division. Judith Pritchard became a lawyer, specializing in family law. Sophie Kowalski founded a nonprofit organization providing support to abuse survivors. They had all transformed their pain into purpose. Meanwhile, in federal prison, Nathaniel Hayes discovered that his crimes had marked him. Inmates have a code, a hierarchy, and those who hurt children occupy the lowest rung. Hayes was beaten repeatedly, isolated for his own protection, spent years in solitary confinement. In 1958, after serving 14 years, he was released. Aged, broken, a shadow of his former self. True to Judge Carmichael's orders, he was monitored, required to report to authorities weekly, prohibited from living near schools, parks, or any place where children congregated. He moved to a boarding house in Camden, New Jersey, worked menial jobs, janitorial work at a warehouse, loading docks. He was no longer Uncle Nate. He was a registered offender, a pariah. In 1962, he attempted to move to Trenton, hoping for anonymity. But Detective Holbrook, now retired but still vigilant, tracked him down. Insured local police were informed. Hayes moved again, and again, always hounded by his past, always watched. Detective Garrison Fletcher Holbrook never forgot the case. Even in retirement, it consumed him. He kept the file in his home office, would periodically review it, checking on Hayes's whereabouts, ensuring compliance with supervision requirements. Holbrook died in 1975 at the age of 82. In his will, he left the case file to the Philadelphia Police Department with a note. __quote _121 __. The note became required reading for all new detectives in the juvenile division. Nathaniel Pemberton Hayes died in 1971 at the age of 76. He had been living in a veterans home in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Alone. No visitors. No friends. The staff knew who he was, what he had done. He died of pneumonia and organ failure. His body was cremated. No funeral. No mourners. The world moved on as if he had never existed. But his victims lived on. In 2010, now in her 70s, Vera Kessler, now Vera Hartman, having married in 1955 and raised 3 children, received a call from a journalist writing a book about child safety advocacy in post-war America. The journalist wanted to interview her about the Hayes case. Vera hesitated. It had been 66 years. Did she want to relive it? But then she thought about her granddaughters, about the importance of speaking up, about breaking silence. She agreed. The interview took place in Vera's home in suburban Philadelphia. She spoke calmly, clearly, about what had happened, about her mother's courage, about Detective Holbrook's determination, about the trial, and about her life afterward. Vera said. The journalist asked. Vera's answer was immediate. Tell someone, anyone, your parents, a teacher, a neighbor you trust. Keep telling until someone believes you and helps you, because there are people who will believe you, who will protect you, and you are not alone. The book was published in 2012, titled Silent No More: The Evolution of Child Protection in America. The Hayes case was featured prominently. The book became a textbook in criminal justice and social work programs across the country, a case study in how communities can fail children by prioritizing image over safety, and how ordinary people, mothers, police officers, prosecutors, can change that paradigm through courage and persistence. In 2015, a crisis center for child abuse survivors opened in Philadelphia. It was named the Dorothy Mae Kessler Center, in honor of the mother who refused to stay silent. At the opening ceremony, Vera Hartman, now 80 years old, cut the ribbon. She spoke to the assembled crowd of survivors, advocates, and community leaders. My mother taught me that love means protection, that real safety requires honesty, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say the words, "Something is wrong," even when the world doesn't want to hear them. This center exists because she said those words, because other mothers said those words, and because brave children found the courage to speak. We honor them today, and we commit to ensuring that every child who walks through these doors will be believed, will be protected, and will be given the tools to heal. The audience rose in standing ovation. Among them were Miriam, Annette, Judith, and Sophie, the other survivors, now elderly women, united by a shared history and a shared mission. The building at 1847 Delancey Street still stands. Renovated in the 1980s, converted to condominiums in the 1990s. Apartment 27 on the 3rd floor is now a modern 2-bedroom unit. A young family with twins lives there. They know nothing of the apartment's history. The real estate agent didn't mention it. Why would she? It was 70 years ago. But the older residents remember. Those who were children in 1944, now octogenarians themselves. They remember the black Plymouth sedan, the handcuffs, the shock. And they remember the mothers who spoke up. When new families move into the building and ask about the history, the old-timers tell them, not to frighten, but to educate. This building had a dark chapter, they say, but it also had heroes, ordinary people who did extraordinary things. They remind us to stay vigilant, to listen to children, to never ignore warning signs just because someone seems nice. Because evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like your friendly neighbor. Somewhere in Philadelphia, in a modest office in the Dorothy Kessler Center, a counselor sits across from a 9-year-old girl. The girl is silent, hugging herself, staring at the floor. The counselor knows this silence, has seen it before. She leans forward gently. I want to tell you a story, she says. When I was your age, something bad happened to me. An adult I trusted did something wrong. I was scared to tell anyone. I thought maybe it was my fault. But then I told my mother. And she believed me. She helped me. She made sure the person who hurt me couldn't hurt anyone else. And you know what? I got better. It took time, but I healed. And I became a counselor so I could help other kids like you. The girl slowly lifts her eyes. There is a spark of hope there. The counselor smiles warmly. You can tell me anything. I promise I will believe you. And I promise I will help. You're not alone. The girl takes a shaky breath and begins to speak. Another silence broken. Another child finding her voice. Another link in a chain of courage that stretches back 70 years to a 9-year-old girl named Vera who told her mother the truth, and to a mother named Dorothy who refused to let that truth be buried. And in the archives of the Philadelphia Police Department, in a file room in the basement, on a shelf marked Historical Cases, sits a folder. Case number 2847, dated October 1944. Defendant, Nathaniel Pemberton Hayes. Inside are the statements, the photographs, the journal, the trial transcripts, the sentencing order, and clipped to the inside cover is a handwritten note from Detective Garrison Fletcher Holbrook, written in 1958 when Hayes was released from prison. To whoever reads this in the future, remember that silence protects predators. Silence gives them time, opportunity, and impunity. Speak. Listen to children. Believe them. Protect them. Put their safety above any consideration of reputation, convenience, or social comfort. Because a child who is not believed is a child who has been betrayed twice. Once by the criminal. Once by those who should have protected them. Do not be the second betrayal. Be the protector. Always. This note is more than a message to future detectives. It is a message to future parents, future teachers, future neighbors. A reminder that safety always matters more than reputation, that truth always matters more than convenience, that a child's voice always matters more than an adult's comfort, and that while evil can wear a friendly face, justice can too. It wears the face of mothers who refuse to be silenced, of detectives who refuse to give up, of juries who refuse to be deceived, and of children who find the courage to speak, knowing that their words might save not just themselves, but countless others. Because that is how cycles are broken. One voice at a time, one act of courage at a time, one refusal to stay silent at a time, until silence itself is no longer an option, until protecting children becomes more important than protecting appearances, until every child knows, if you speak, someone will listen, someone will believe, someone will act, and justice, though sometimes delayed, will prevail.